So folks are still joining us, so there'll probably be a couple more that will join us. But Jeff, to be mindful of your time, we'll get the class going. Again, thank everybody for joining us. As we talked about last week in class, I want to kind of transfer from, as much as we've been talking about play-by-play, I want to touch on color analysts. A lot of the preparation, a lot of what you do to get ready for a game is very similar to play-by-play, but the execution is different. And Jeff does play-by-play and color, so he can talk a little bit about both of them. But that's why I wanted to bring Jeff Piecoro in here to really talk about how you get prepared to do color analysts. And he's exactly what we are talking about in this class. A student athlete who wanted to continue in the sport, and he found a way to do it, and he's still doing it to this day. So Jeff Piecoro has worked for the Reds. As I mentioned in class, he does work for Fox Sports. He's got a sports director job now in Lexington, does a lot for the SEC network. He's from Tates Creek High School, which is one of these high schools that they are perennially good in sports. They are. They've been good in basketball, football, baseball. And Jeff, I did not realize this, but one of the Backstreet Boys is from Tates Creek. I did not know that.
Amazingly enough, Brian lives about 5 houses from my parents' home in Lexington, and in one of their albums or CDs, whatever you call them now, they actually use the Tates Creek Band as a backup to them
Oh,
and their choir that's actually sang on one of their albums. So yeah, it's pretty neat.
that is pretty neat. But Jeff played football at UK, University of Kentucky,
Yeah.
and moved right into broadcasting. So, this is something that was on his mind while he was going to school. But Jeff, I will kind of turn it over to you, let you talk about your interest in getting into sports broadcasting, how you did it, how you really made those opportunities for yourself. And as we go on, the students will have some questions for you
Sure.
about, about your experience and any advice you have and things like that. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Betsy. And just I don't think that you guys, I'm gonna wear my glasses because I can't see my notes anymore. It happens when you hit 63 years old. I hope you guys understand who your teacher is, because to us growing up in the 70s, it turned into the 80s. Um, I know she's too modest to say this to you guys, but she was one of the ladies, the women, whatever you want. I'm sorry if I say ladies and it's offensive to anybody. The women who kind of broke that barrier back. There was Phyllis George and Jane Kennedy and Leslie Visser and Linda Cohn and Betsy Ross, and she was one of those I don't know, whatever you want to call them, trailblazers, pioneers. But I know that all of us that was in sports at the time are the holy grail. Starting in what, 1979, I think it was, Betsy, was to try to get on ESPN. That was the top of the mountain, and she made it there, and has done a great job in everything she's done since then. So you guys are in great hands with her, and anything I say is just kind of icing on the cake to what she's probably already
Well,
taught you, to tell
thank
you the
you.
truth.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, but anyway, my story, it's the same as I think a lot of you, and this is for the females too. Uh, I enjoyed sports growing up. My father played baseball at Ohio State. My brothers both played baseball in college, so I decided I wanted to play football. I was the oldest, but you realize when you play for Notre Dame or when you play in the Southeastern Conference that you look around, you go, okay, I'm a 5'11", 185-pound defensive back. Probably not going to make it to the NFL. What can I do to kind of stay in this business? And I always thought that the guys who came in to and women, when I say guys, um, to interview us after games, I said, that guy drives a pretty cool car, and they wear nice clothes. I that might be something I'd like to do. And so I looked into it, and I was really lucky. And I tell this to anybody I talk to, if it's a elementary school, or a high school, to college, get an internship, because to get in the door, everybody wants to be in front of the camera. First off, everybody thinks it's the greatest job in the world. But once you get into a facility, be it a radio station or a TV station, there are so many jobs in the field. Because I played and because I had a background in communication, telecom, broadcast journalism in college, I could talk. So I thought, you know what, I want to be in front of the camera. And I got an internship at an ABC station, and the sports director there was a guy named Kenny Rice. I don't know, Betsy, if you know Kenny. Kenny is a national. He does most thoroughbred horse racing. And so what I'm getting at with that is find a niche. And because every sport now is broadcast, if you're a lacrosse player, if you're a field hockey player, if you're into horses, there are huge opportunities for all of those. We see now that there's the tennis channel, there's the golf channel. There are so many opportunities out there. But what I was getting at earlier, I know she wants me to talk more about being a color analyst and play by play, which I've done, for since 1986. But once you get in, for instance, with the Reds, our producer, and just give you a little note on how much these people can make. Our producer with the Reds was really good. He used to work in Atlanta. He worked at CNN and TBS and did the Atlanta Hawks and the Atlanta Braves. He makes $2,000 a game. A game. Remember, there's 162 baseball games in a year. He makes 2,000 a game. You do the math. And that's one thing that kind of people go, wow. Now it's different when you're working at the affiliate in Bloomington or in Indianapolis or Cincinnati. You're not going to make $2,000 a game, but that just shows you the kind of the wide breadth that there is in the place. But find that niche. Producers make great money. Audio guys make great money. It's a fun job. There's a lot more than just being in front of the camera in sports. And I will tell you this, there are two places to go. Ohio University, Indiana University is fantastic, but Ohio University and Miami of Florida have a sports marketing program that everybody I've ever met in baseball, it seems, they have what we call the black book in all the sports. And if you open up the black book in Major League Baseball, almost every team has someone from Ohio University. Their program there is fantastic if you're looking to try to do something like that. But to get back to me, playing, I noticed really quick I probably wasn't going to go on and play. So what can I do? Kenny was able to as soon as I graduated 3 days later, he hired me at the ABC affiliate, and so that's how I started. The great thing with Kenny is it got me in a lot of doors in horse racing, which I liked, but I was able to find that niche. And once you get in this business, and I know Betsy will tell you this as well, it's the people that you work for. And what I mean that is the directors and the producers, because most of them don't just do one singular sport, they do everything. So I was able to get in horse racing, and that got me into doing some of the races at the different racetracks around this area. And when I say this, the region, up in Ohio, in Kentucky, Indiana. And through that, I met a lot of different people, and they said, hey, you're decent. You speak okay. Why don't you, come do this? We're doing this race, and we're going to have it on, a channel 64 type, an independent channel. So we did that. I started doing some high school games, and you basically work yourself up the ladder. And the cool thing was, so I started doing games for Fox, back when Fox first started Fox Sports, and I was doing Atlantic 10 basketball and MAC football. And my director for that also then became the director when the Reds baseball started, when it left multimedia, which, what was that, Betsy? Channel 5, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was Channel 5, which is an NBC channel in
Yeah,
Cincinnati.
because they had
And
been on Channel 5 forever, forever. Yeah.
yeah, but they only did like 30 or 40 games a
Hmm.
year. And that was what it was like back in the old days. And then when Fox took it over, at that time we were called Sports Channel when I first started with them. And I got to work with another one of the Titans in George Grand, who Betsy knows. And George taught me so much. George was the first person that said, "Hi, everyone. Welcome to what we're calling Sports Center." Back in 1979, I think it was. And George then he was the roommate of Tom Seaver, played baseball at USC. But George is one of those guys. And the one thing I can tell you, be a sponge with Betsy, because you learn so much. I learned, for instance, from George. Now we're doing baseball, but every game he kept a notebook, and he brought the notebook on the road and everything. And after the game was over, as soon as we signed off, he would sit there for 10 minutes in the booth and just jot notes down. And it's the notebooks that had the little tabs on it. So he would put on the tab, it would be Dodgers, Cubs, Padres, Indians, all the different teams. And he would go to that, and he would just jot down notes. So I was like, "Well, George, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, we're going to play these guys again. So I want to," because I just kept a scorebook. You keep score of the game. Okay. When you're doing play by play or the color, you keep score. You have to in baseball and in basketball to keep up with what's going on. Um, and I said, "Okay, I keep this. I can," yeah, but he says, you got to remember nuances in the game, and it helps later. So you call this stuff from the people that you work for. Um, and George was fantastic with that. But then, so what I'm getting at is it's the relationships that you build in this industry, uh, because there's always something else going on. So to backtrack a second, Kenny Rice, then when what's called the Breeders' Cup, I don't know if you guys have heard about that, the horse racing. It's a huge event. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So Tom Hammond, Kenny Rice, um, gosh, there's Bob Newmeyer from up east, all started this thing called the Breeders' Cup newsfeed. And Kenny called me and said, "Would you like to be a part of this?" And I'm like, "Of course I would." So basically, what we did was the week of Breeders' Cup, we would go uh, wherever the race was. It was all over the country and into Canada as well. And we did every single day, we did 2 hour long shows that we sent to all the TV stations. All the TV stations around the country could pick this up, because if you're the NBC affiliate in Cincinnati, you're not going to send somebody out to Santa Anita to cover the race. So we did that for them. They would say, "Hey, there's a guy that owns Darby Dan Farm in Columbus, Ohio, and he's got a horse. Could you get something for us?" So it's little things like that. You just add stuff and add stuff, uh, and then pretty soon you meet all these people all over. And when there's events or when there's new things that come out or new channels that come out, these people all go to work for them. It's the people that you meet and the relationships that you build within sports, and I'm talking about everything. And that's how you kind of work your way up the ladder. David Ashbrook, that I know Betsy knows very, very well. David got me into doing college basketball at a higher level than I was doing. I was doing some, smaller games, MAC and stuff. And then with David, I was able to go into the Big East. I was able to go into Atlantic 10. When Tom Brenneman left Cincinnati, he brought me in, and for 8 years, I was UC's play-by-play guy on Fox 19. And we did, I think, 15, 16 games a year. So it's all about relationships in that. But the biggest thing I can tell you is, when you start, try to instead of a shotgun approach, try to be, I don't want to say an expert, but try to know as much as you can about a single sport, and then work from that and you'll be able to grow from there. Um, because to me, everything's getting your foot in the door, and that's why I say get an internship. A good friend of Betsy and mine is Dennis Jansen in Cincinnati, and when he got out of college, he went to the TV station there and said, "Is there anything I can do? I'll be a janitor. I'll do library tapes, things like that." And all of a sudden, 15 years later, Betsy's making a couple $100,000 as the lead sports guy at one of the stations in Cincinnati. So you never know where your break's going to come, but you definitely use all of your relationships that you can within the business. And again, I was lucky because I played, so that gave me kind of a foot in the door, so to speak. And now the other thing too, if there's any of the athletes that are on here, a lot of the places, ESPN is one of them, they have schools now. They call it a school, but a lot of players that are playing now who, like Peyton Manning, for instance, and guys like that, they say, you know what, I think I might want to become do this. Well, they have the NFL has it at the NFL Network where they bring players in, and then they'll bring people like Betsy or me in, and you actually do games with them and teach them how to do it, basically. And I think that's pretty cool now. So if you're not an athlete, I'm sorry, they get a little bit, they're going to get a head start on you. That's just the way it is, and that's just the way life is. But if you're good, Bob Costas never played a sport, but he's pretty damn good. So you don't have to. I'm not saying you have to play a sport to be a play-by-play or a color guy, but know it as well as you can when you go into a place. Betsy can tell you about uh, some of the things they'll do at ESPN when they're interviewing you to bring you in to for a job opening there. If you want to be on, ESPN News is where they usually start most of the people, instead of you don't look. There's not many people out there that are going to get a job at ESPN and today and tomorrow they're going to be doing the 11 o'clock show on Sports Center. That just doesn't happen. You have to work your way up the ladder. And it's pretty neat. But if you ever get a chance, and Betsy could probably help you with this, I would say go there, because you will be absolutely amazed at the campus, which started out in this little corner of Connecticut and has exploded into the worldwide leader. And some people call it the evil empire, but it's pretty remarkable to take a journey up there and to go through that place. It
Yeah,
is.
it is grown. Yeah, it was just a couple of trailers and a big mud
Yeah.
pile, and they made it
Yeah.
work. But one thing
Yeah.
that we've talked about a lot in class is, I always say I do play by play, and I think I have the easy job because all I do is describe what happened.
Yep.
The color analyst has to describe why it happened, and that's why
Yes.
you see so many former players as color analysts, because they know the game and they know why a particular 2-3 zone, or,
Mhm.
but man to man, they know why there's a particular defense, or they know why things happen. So we talk a lot about being prepared. And the example that I used, that who knew that the Super Bowl was going to be a blowout? So
Yeah.
you have to fill a lot of time in the third and fourth quarter that you weren't expected to. So that's why you go in there with
That's right.
this notebook full of facts. So when you prepare to be a color analyst,
Mhm.
what is the difference between you preparing to be on color instead of play by play? And really, what kind of research do you do?
Mhm.
Do you talk to the coaches? Do you talk to the players? What do you do to get ready for a game?
Sure. Um, Let me do one that I, so if I'm doing a game, let's say I'm doing Notre Dame and Ohio State. Okay. I don't do those regularly, right? I do the SEC. So if I'm doing a Notre Dame Ohio State game, usually on Friday, you get to go in to the city, wherever the game is. And you go to what we call a production meeting. In that production meeting, you'll have usually the head coach will come in, and then the offensive coordinator, and then the defensive coordinator, and usually two or three of the key players in the game, your quarterback, your middle linebacker, something like that. And we get to ask questions and write notes, and they'll tell you stuff. Hey, you can't say this on the air, but so and so's got a broken ankle and he's not playing. We don't want anybody to know till the game starts. Um, but yeah, that's one thing. But it's changed so much, Betsy, from when I first started because of what we're doing right now, computers and the internet. I can go back and watch. So if I'm doing Ohio State, Notre Dame, for instance, I can go back and watch the 8 previous games that both of those teams played. So I'm getting a feel of what they're trying to do. So that's why when you watch, I'll just say the NFL because it's so much easier. Tom Brady knows what's going to happen because he was a quarterback, but he also knows who they're trying to get the balls to. And Tony Romo and those guys, they're so good. But that just doesn't come because they played. You have to know what you're talking about because, as Betsy said, you never know when a game is going to be a blowout. You never know when weather is going to play a role, and all of a sudden, a team like a perfect example, Betsy, was, and you guys were too young for this, but it was called the Freezer Bowl. The San Diego Chargers had one of the greatest offenses in the history of pro football. They came to Cincinnati to play for a chance to go to the Super Bowl, and it was 59 below zero, and they couldn't throw the ball. And so now everything changes, right? If you're playing and it's pouring down rain or whatever, everything changes in a game. So you have to know the nuts and bolts of the team. But again, because of what's in front of you, and that this is this computer, everything is at your fingertips. You can never have as much. And this goes, if you do the same thing as an interview, you'll never have enough information on the person you're interviewing. You're going to have too much, right? Pages and pages of stuff, and you cull it down. I wish I had my flip chart in front of me for football. But so what I do is I get a page, and it's probably, I don't know, 20 by 36. So it's a pretty decent thing. And I have the offense and defense too deep. Okay. And I put in there, I put the number, which is really big. And I put their name, their size, the school, and then any accomplishments and stuff, or anything like his brother played at Michigan. His mom was an Olympic athlete. His dad was basketball. He has 3 brothers that played at Notre Dame, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's all information. So as the week starts, because every week it's a different game, it's a little easier when you do a school. So if I'm one of the Notre Dame announcers, I know my team. So all I have to really do is do work on the other team. But so it starts on Monday. They have the coaches all have teleconferences on Monday, and we listen to that. That comes out on the computers. Each conference does it. The Big 12, the SEC, Big 10, whatever. And each of the coaches have their specific time. So you listen to the teleconference. That's on Monday. On Tuesday is when I start getting my notes of tendencies of what teams do. Tendencies are third and shorts, third and long. They throw this. This guy is great against zone. This guy's a really good route runner. Things like that. And again, I'm just talking about football here. Wednesday is when the first injury report comes out, so you can start to get a grasp of who's going to play or something. I usually do not do my board, which is my flip card. I usually don't do that until Thursday or Friday, because you have a Monday is just kind of like a walkthrough. That's when they're putting, the game plan together. Tuesday and Wednesday are the 2 really hard practices when they're going to go out in pads. Thursday is again another lighter day, and then Friday is travel day for the teams. And so usually by Thursday, I'll know if a guy's going to play or not, or if somebody's significantly injured or not, so I can use him in my charts. And then Friday night, when you get to the place, I talk to the coaches on that Friday, and then we go back to the room, and that's when I start putting all my little notes in. On Friday night. Saturday, when you get to the stadium, we usually get there about 3 hours early for a football game. And that's when you talk to the other announcers. And we all know each other. Most of us have played against each other. And I will tell you, that's where you get a lot of really, really, really good stuff because, they're going to ask you questions and you ask them questions. And yeah, then and you might see some of the newspaper guys who know some stuff, and but yeah, it all leads up to the week, and then all throughout the week too. I might watch a game or two of them. I watch a lot during the season. When I'm doing baseball, I watch, in the room at night. You always watch baseball tonight and things like that. In football, there's so many shows now, and I'll tell you a really good thing too. And you always know when somebody's a gambler because they know so much about it. So I watch the gambling shows. There's a network called Visin, VISN, and they give you some great information on injuries, trends, tendencies that teams have. And this isn't everything: football, baseball, basketball, boxing, whatever. But so that's kind of how the week leading up to the game goes. And then once the kickoff starts, you throw all that out the window because it never goes as how you're planned. But again, when you watch, you can tell if someone knows what they're talking about and did their homework or not. And I don't want to be one of those people where they say, that guy really doesn't know what he's talking about there. And then there's other times, and you have to remember this. I could go on the air and say that Kentucky is in a double roll up zone and they're using cloud coverage, and you're going to sit there and go, what in the hell is this guy talking about? You have to remember your audience. And I remember, and Betsy, you'll appreciate this, I told this to Dan Horde. Dan is a great announcer, and I said, Dan, I said, you got to throw some ain'ts in there and stuff, because Dan kind of speaks the King's English. And I said, you got to remember, if you're doing a Tuesday night Cincinnati Reds Pittsburgh Pirates game, and both of these teams are 25 games out of first place, your diction, they don't care about. You gotta keep them. You have to keep them excited in the game, or keep them interested. And that's why we love our hometown announcer so much, because for Betsy and I, Marty and Joe would talk about farming and growing tomatoes and things like that, and that's the hook, and that's why we love our school, whatever school you or wherever you're from, that school's main duo of broadcasters, because they talk about things that are relevant to you as you're growing up and stuff, and it's neat to watch or listen to those people. But again, you can never have too much information going into the game. And then when you work at a network like Betsy and I have, you have other people, you have PAs and assistants and stuff who produce, assistant producers and stuff that do a ton of work for you too. So it's almost, you almost want to filter it. And when you get to the highest of levels, we have guys that come with us. They're stat guys that we like. Daddy Wags was one of the best. That was a guy that I used in Cincinnati. Was a wonderful guy. But they allow those people to travel with you. They pay them to travel with you and stuff. And every broadcasting crew has those people, but they're big helps too.
Yeah, stat people make you look really, really smart, and I love them. Yeah. Any questions? I don't have everybody on my screen, so if you have a question, just jump in. Anybody?
Let me tell you this, Betsy, because you asked
Yeah,
about
go ahead.
interviews. When you're so here's another thing. When you get to someplace at a network, when you get to the network level, you kind of get pigeonholed into different things. This person is a great reporter. This one is a great play-by-play. This one is a great color analyst. This one is a great this, that, or the other. I knew that with what I did, and what I knew, that I would be a good interviewer. And if you ever watched the Reds games that I did for 26 years, I was the guy that after the game, every day I had to interview the man. Every single game before the game, I had to interview him. Just me and him talk. But after the game, on camera was interviews. And the greatest thing I can tell you about interviewing, and I don't care what sport it is, if you're in politics, this is your greatest asset, your ears. when you go into an interview, okay, let's say you're going to interview President Trump, you're going to have a list of 10 questions you want to ask him, right? You might get the first one and never do the other nine, because use your ears and listen. I always hate it when someone is interviewing somebody and they ask that first question and the person gives a fabulous answer that leads to something that you didn't even write down, and then they look at their list and go, well, what about blah 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 blah, and you're like, he just gave you or she gave you the perfect answer that, and you're not listening. Listen to your subject. And this goes if you're doing news, if you're doing weather, if you're doing sports. Listen, your ears will help you. And again, that's knowing your subject, because when they say something to you, you have to play off of what they do, because really the interviewee is going to steer that interview. And you just have to kind of keep them within the rails of what you're trying to do. But I always, and Betsy worked with this guy, and he's a guy that I tried to emulate. Roy Firestone was one of the great interviewers of all time. If you have a chance, you can look him up. Uh, he he's one of the guys that I emulated, because we did a show called Bengals Spotlight, and it was a 30-minute sit down, me and the other person, Anthony Munoz, Paul Brown, Greg Cook, all these guys. It was just one on one. Excuse me. And Roy, when he did it, would get them to cry almost every interview. Am I right, Betsy? He would get so personal that these people would start crying, and people at home, it was gold. It was just awesome. So I tried to get to that point where, I knew that he hadn't had a relationship with his father, so to speak, since he was, 12 years old, and now he's this great player, and I'll just like an Anthony Munoz type of player that everybody knows this guy, and him and his father had this great reunion, and he starts telling a story and he's crying, and it just makes it great. And Roy Firestone was great at that. So I always tried to get personal in the interviews, and I think the people that you're the especially guys in sports, girls in sports, they love to talk about their parents and their family and things like that, and it makes for a great interview. But to me, the biggest thing I wrote it down: listen, listen. That to me
That's
is the biggest thing I can tell you.
That's very true. Yeah, my claim to fame is I got Santa Claus to cry in an interview one time. Yeah, and it was taught. I would just ask about, what little kid their Christmas wish, what really touched you,
Yeah.
and he started crying. And I don't know about you, Pick, but like when somebody starts crying in an interview and you're sitting there very serious, going, yeah, 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 and inside you're going, yes.
Yes, exactly.
So
Exactly.
you're trying not to be so excited that they're crying,
Yeah.
but you really are, because you know it
Yeah.
is. It's tears
Yeah.
on tape. It's gold. It is gold.
Yeah.
So,
I will.
um,
Let me just add one more thing. So, I mentioned Kenny Rice because he has been such um, a great mentor to me. But Kenny also then went to work for Mark Cuban's network, and he used to own Access TV, AXS, I think it was, or it's called Access. You guys have probably seen it, but they did Kenny started doing a UFC show, the fighting stuff. And this was 10, 12 years ago when it was just kind of starting to take off. So anyway, through that, there was another offshoot of that called the MMA, which is mixed martial arts. So again, a guy that I worked with years ago came to me and said, hey, we're starting this program. It's called the MMA Big Show. Would you like to be a part of it? Now, let me tell you something. I couldn't tell you what a takedown was from I couldn't tell you anything about mixed martial arts. I can't spell karate, right? I thought it started with a C. Um, but I said, yeah, never say no. Okay. Don't bastardize yourself and take less money, but don't ever say no. So I said, sure. And so when do we start? And he goes, well, it's actually a week from Saturday is going to be our first show. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, a week from Saturday, da 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 da. We'd like you to come up. We train at this little place up here, and the show was good. And what it was is they were at all these Mohegan Sun, all the different casinos. Belterra had just been built over, you know where that is, guys. It's Indiana right there on the
Yeah,
border,
over in Indiana. Yeah.
Belterra Casino, Ohio, Indiana kind of area, and so that's where the first one was. So and you can look it up and see and on YouTube and stuff. Just put like Jeff Piecoro MMA, and it's hilarious because I look like I'm 12 years old, and but just learning this stuff. But that goes back to what I was saying before about. So that got me into a whole nother realm that I never even thought of doing. And it was cool. And so Rich Franklin was a guest of ours. Rich Franklin was a world champion who from Cincinnati. I think Betsy knows Rich. He was a school teacher, became a world champion in UFC. His coach, his boxing coach, would come on and give us pointers. But it's really cool. The people that you meet and the people that you work with, if you're a good person, if you treat them, and this is one thing that I always say, treat the people that you work for in the when you're in the booth, okay, and you guys you never see this on the air, but when Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth are doing a game, they're standing there, but they have a makeup person that's there. They've got you've got the stage manager that's there. Treat those people with respect and dignity because they've earned it, and they can make you look good and they can make you look bad. The camera guys, all those people, treat them with respect. Because if word gets around that you're a jerk, that and the crew doesn't like you, then you're not going to get any work. So that's one thing too. And I'll tell you this, for you guys that, I know everybody wants to be in front of the camera. Camera guys that work a Reds game, they make about $400 a game. And again, you're talking about 80 home games, but it's only 5.5 months of work. So that's pretty good. You're making almost $40,000 for that for 5 months. And then most of those guys, a couple of the guys that are on our Reds team are actually uh, uh, Justin Jameson. I think Double J Betsy. He's on Monday Night Football now. He's a shooter for that. There's a bunch of guys that once you're good at something and you're not a troublemaker and you're just a good person, you're going to get work within this business because everything is who you know, and it all stems down from that. But Victor Victoria is an A1. He lives in Northern Kentucky, and he does the Masters. He does NBA basketball. He's college football. I mean, it is a small circle of people, and once you get in it, you can make a heck of a living, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in front of the screen. But it's been great to me. It's been great to Betsy. I love it. I'm going to keep doing it as long as I can. I'm 63 years old. Tried to retire twice, and it's just don't like being retired. I'm still doing football. I'm still doing baseball. I just did a yesterday, and Betsy, you love this. Yesterday, I did for SEC Network. I did the Kentucky Georgia women's basketball game. Love doing women's basketball. They actually play the game the right way. There's plays, there's strategy. It's not just a one-on-one every time down the court. But there's so many opportunities for you guys now. ESPN for the SEC Network, ESPN pays each school per event. So they have a pocket of money, the schools do, that ESPN pays to them. And then the university uses their students, just like you guys, as camera people, as runners, all different kinds of things. You're working in the control room, you're on the cameras, and it's everything. It's gymnastics, it's softball, baseball, the football games that aren't broadcast on national TV. They put those all on. So there's a ton of games. Just think of that in college baseball season, they play 55, 60 games. You're doing all those games and you get paid for it too. So it's a great experience. So look into that if you're looking just to try to get in the door to see if you might like something. And I know a lot of schools. Syracuse is probably the best in the country at this. Everybody at ESPN worked at Syracuse, or I mean, went to school at Syracuse, but they have a great program up there. Indiana's got a great program. I know you guys hate to hear that, but Dick Enberg gave them a lot of money and a lot of cameras and things like that he through the years. But there are some great opportunities out there for you. But go to your school and ask them, is there any opportunity for me to do something? Kentucky just built at Rupp Arena, which is the huge basketball arena. They just built a new facility there, Betsy, and I'm going to tell them to have you down. It is a studio, and it's a glass studio, so everybody that's walking into the game can see them doing pregame shows. They do podcasting there, and it's all student run. So the director's a student, the producer's a student. Now they have someone that oversees it. Audio students, camera people are students. So it's pretty cool. And we do stuff out of that for the school too. And I'm sure that Notre Dame has something like that as well. But
Right. Yeah, we've got Fighting
it's
Irish
awesome.
Media, and
Yeah.
so many, so many of my students are doing
Mhm.
Fighting Irish Media right now, and you get that kind of experience. So
Yep.
was anybody at the men's basketball news conference?
I
Um,
was. I was the.
oh,
I was the
tell me
next
about
question.
it.
I was the next question after Coach Shrewsbury stormed out. That was actually going to lead into a question I had for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
I'm Ben. I'm from Cincinnati, so I
Okay.
watched you growing up with the Reds, and my question was kind of obviously the Reds have been garbage for a long time, and but people still watch, and I think part of that is because the pregame coverage and the coverage is so good. And I've done a lot of the men's basketball games this year, and men's basketball is not having a good year, as came out in the frustration last night. So just kind of was wondering tips on how you, whether it's writing on camera, whatever it may be, how do you cover a team that's not performing to expectations to keep people interested?
In the 26 years that I was a Reds broadcaster, I want to say 7 seasons were winning seasons. We went to playoffs 4 times in 26 years. 4 times we went to playoffs. So a lot of losing. Um, I, you know, there's always so many fun stories uh, in and around a team. And when you're doing the kind of stuff, Ben, that I was doing, um, you find out that guys uh, likes, dislikes. I mean, here's the thing, and I told this to every player that came through that was worth his salt: is you guys are going to get sick of me by the time the season ends, because I'm going to be out here at spring training for 4 or 5 weeks. I fly on the plane with you. I stay in the hotel with you, and I'm at every single game. And I have to do an interview with somebody. One of these 26 guys is going to have to come on with me every single day. And I don't care who it is, but so you get to learn. There are some guys who are really good, and there are some guys that aren't very good. Joey Votto is one of the great players in the history of the Cincinnati Reds. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He's going to be in the Reds Hall of Fame. He wasn't a great interview. He was very cerebral, and you have to know who you're interviewing. So you could not ask Joey a question that he could answer yes or no, because he would say yes or no, and then just look at you like, next question. So it makes it hard, but it's a challenge that was like, okay, let me see if I can get him to answer something here. I'll tell you this: once the guys and the girls that you're trying to cover understand that you're not going to throw them under the bus, and I'm not looking to undermine anybody's career, it's a little different when you work for a team as opposed to working for ESPN or NBC or CBS. I work for the Reds. So I'm kind of on your side, you know, but I told him that. I said, look, you're going to get sick of me, but I don't care what you do. I don't care who you're hanging out with in the room. I don't care what you do. If you're going out every night, it doesn't matter. All I care about is when you step across that white line. And once they trust you, then they'll open up to you. Um, Griffey was a hard guy because he was a moody kind of, he was some days you're his best friend. Yeah, you walk in, he's laughing and joking with you, and other days you walk in, you see him and he's sulking in his locker. You didn't go around him. You learn that. He said, hey man, I want you guys to come down. My son's getting ready to play in this um, was he a football all-star game or something? Why don't you come down and shoot it and stuff, and I'll fly you down, and I mean things like that. Then you Homer Bailey was another guy, really hard to interview, did not like the media, didn't want you in his little circle. But and he was a guy that was always thought that we were going to try to undermine him somehow. And once he figured out that I wasn't going to do that, then he would talk to me, because a lot of times, and again, most of the time we talk to these guys is after they did something good. If I'm interviewing Joey on the field, he'd hit a home run or something. If I interview Homer, he's thrown a no hitter, right? I'm sure a lot of you, if you know anything about me, when I interviewed Homer, he said a couple words on the air that we had to apologize for. But uh, once they get to know you and you're not, that you're not, Betsy, this is a question I have for you too, because when you and I came through this business, um, it was about the sport. And that's what I try to tell everybody. So Anna and Emma and Sophie and Bryn and Jada and all you guys, if you ever get into this, nobody's watching whatever game you're covering for you. Nobody's watching the Reds because Jeff Piecoro is doing the game. Okay. That's what you have to keep in your mind. It's those 9 guys that are on the baseball field, or the 5 guys on the court, or whatever you're covering. That's the star, not you. And when Betsy and I came up through the ranks, that was what it is. It's changed now. And I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but we all call it the ESPN factor, because it's everyone wants to be the next Stuart Scott, to say he's as cool as the other side of the pillow, and or Chris Berman, and make nicknames for everybody. Or you can get even worse and say they want to be the next Sterling Sharp, who screams and hollers, or these guys. And now it just seems like every sports show that's on, the loudest person is the smartest person. And I'm not watching it because this guy's telling me, who's never played the sport, what's wrong with the sport. Does that make sense? And I just
Well, and I think that when you look, like, you're right. When I started ESPN, they made sure there were no personalities. It was their thing that there was never going to be a personality bigger than ESPN. Well, Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick
yeah,
kind of changed that.
yeah.
So now, okay, you have 2 people who do the 11 o'clock every night, and then people know. And then, I mean, now you can almost flip that 180, because it's
Yes,
now the Stephen A's,
yes,
and they're walking in there with, huge contracts. Um, and that, I think, is, at least to me, because I kind of feel that I think that I'm a purist in all this, is that I I want to know the game. I want to know what happened in the game. I want to know why something happened in the game. I don't need somebody screaming at me. I want your knowledge. That's why I think it was so disappointing to me personally that you let Susie Colbert go, who I worked with. I like her. She has forgotten more about football than I will ever know. But they let her go because she's not a screamer, and she doesn't, really draw that attention. She was thoughtful in her questions. She was able to lead the panel, in the pre-games. And to let someone go like that, not because she didn't have the knowledge, because she does, but you replace her because you are paying some of these other folks a whole lot of money, and you can't afford to keep her. And then when Stephen A walks in there and wants $6 or $7 million a year, you think to yourself, well, I got to give him that money. That's the disappointing thing to me
yep,
in how ESPN has changed. I mean, it was started, as you know, by newspaper guys
yep.
and magazine guys. And I always say that ESPN is the only place I ever worked that I wrote everything that I read. They put such a high premium on your writing skills. When I
Right.
went into audition, they gave me the Sports Center script, said, rewrite the first segment, and we'll put you on the set and we'll tape you.
Yep.
So they put such a premium on your writing skills. I'm not sure they do that anymore.
No.
And that, to
No.
me, is the disappointing part.
Yeah, Susie, by the way, Susie worked with us for the Breeders' Cup as well. She did that. She did that too. She was one of the, I guess there was like 9 of us that did that. It was a great thing. But no, to get back to what you're saying, I agree 100%. And I'll tell you this too, folks. It's an unfortunate situation that's going on in uh, the local sector of news. The Grays, the Scripps, Next Stars have all taken over all these wonderful smaller things. I mean, Betsy and I and Ben, you grew up in Cincinnati. WLW, when it was owned by J-Core, which was a smaller thing, was so much fun to listen to. And now, of course, it's become iHeart, and it's a huge thing, and it's a corporation, and it's ruined radio, and that's what's happening now in unfortunately in local television. So I'm I say this and hate it, because if I want highlights, I'm going to watch ESPN. But you're not going to get your local high schools on ESPN. And that's what you have to focus on. And the problem now has become these huge companies, Scripps, Nexstar, is that all they see is the bottom line. And so the unfortunate thing is, for instance, at the station that I'm at, which is an ABC affiliate, we're a smaller company. It's Morris Media, but we have a hub for our weather. So this horrible weather we're having here in the Ohio Valley, our weather's coming from Mississippi. And the girl in Mississippi is talking about the flooding, and she doesn't say the name of the counties right, or the towns and things like that. Because they're saving a ton of money doing that. They're cutting back salaries at local TV. So
Well, they just got rid of your news director, right?
Yes, yeah. So Morris Media owns 8 stations. So they took the news director of all 8 stations away. So they don't have a news director. They have what they call a content supervisor. So a news director makes, I don't know, let's just say $150,000. This new person is making $60,000. So they're saving what, $90,000 times 8. So they're, is that really worth the news being hurt as bad as it is? And the great newscasters that we grew up with, unfortunately, are going by the wayside now at the local stations, because it's just becoming an arm of these corporations. And it's unfortunate, but that I still think that there's always going to be a place with your teams. And that's what I tell everybody that comes through that I know that works at our station. One of the girls that worked at our station, she was my weekend anchor in sports, and a reporter. She's actually from Bogota, Colombia. A beautiful blonde-haired girl. You would never know she's from Colombia, but English was her second language, and she spoke it just like you and I are speaking right now. She had the opportunity to leave after her contract was up about a year ago, and she is at Channel 6 in Miami, which is owned by Telemundo. So every anchor at Channel 6 in Miami, I don't know if any of you have been to Miami, Florida, but it's a huge Latin community down there. And all of their anchors are bilingual. And it was a perfect spot for her. So she went down there, and she is their lead sportscaster named Sarah Cardona. And Sarah is the number one weekday sportscaster, and she's bilingual. So, and another thing, if you have an opportunity to learn Spanish, please do it, because every team now in Major League Baseball has to carry an interpreter. They get paid very good to be an interpreter. You get to sit on the bench and watch the baseball game, and it doesn't matter if you're a girl or a guy. You watch the game, and then when the game's over, anybody that wants to interview Ellie De La Cruz, or whoever your player is, you go through the interpreter. And every team has this in baseball. It's moving in other sports as well. Soccer, most all the soccer teams have interpreters, and that's growing so much. Soccer, all these other sports that aren't part of the big 3, baseball, football, and basketball, are just growing because of these networks now. The Big Ten network, the SEC network, all these things, and it's just growing and growing and growing. So there's so many opportunities for you guys out there. I would find a niche and go do that instead of trying to get into local TV. The money's not there anymore. Betsy will tell you. I don't know how they're still paying Fox 19. Uh, how they're still paying, I'm losing my mind. I can't think of her name. Who's
I Oh,
the
Trisha?
anchor? Trish Mackey. Yeah,
Trisha?
I've known
Well,
Trish since she was a little kid, but
oh yeah, yeah, we
you
all have.
know,
And she's another
Joe,
example of
yeah,
starting there as an intern and working her way up. Yeah.
yeah, and Joe, they have two sports guys there, and they've been there for a long time. They're really good, but they get no help. It's just the two of them, right? And they do everything. They work how many hours a week? 60 hours a
Oh
week,
yeah.
probably. Easy.
And of course they added the Bengals show this past year. They
Yes.
did bring
So they
in
did that. Yeah, they brought it. Yeah.
yeah, but it's a big investment.
Mhm.
When you pay for the rights, then of course you got to make it up on the back
Right.
end with your advertising. So, and then Fox had the Super Bowl, so that helps
Yep.
with the local ads. But yeah, you have to remember it's a business. But to your point, Pick, it's, where am I going to see the Elder High School football? I'm not
Right.
going to see their highlights on ES. Well,
Right.
sometimes I do, but
Yeah.
most nights you're not going to see their
Right.
highlights on ESPN, and that's what makes local and so important.
But Betsy, don't you think that this is something I think is really cool now is almost every team, and when I say this, all the football teams, basketball teams, I'm talking NBA, NFL, they now have uh, their own network, if you will, Bengals.com. They have people that do social media now. So there's so many more avenues. When Betsy and I started, um, it was the 3 or 4 stations when Fox came around at the local markets, and then ESPN, and that was it. And none of these teams, and now teams are taking actual their broadcasts in house and are doing. Yankees own the Yes Network, things like that, where they have their own networks now, and they're doing so much more programming. So when I talk to you guys now, I'm saying try to get in with the team, and it's minor league teams. They all do the same stuff. Um, in Lexington, Kentucky, here there's the Atlantic League. It's called in baseball, which is an A league, so it's a lower ring. But they've got radio, they have a social media person, and all these people are making decent money now that was never around when Betsy and I came through. So there's so many more opportunities, but there's also a lot more people like you guys who want to get into the business. But it's just there's so many more avenues than there ever were in the past.
Yeah, and I think that's the good thing about it, just because of what the teams are doing, frankly, what the players are doing with their
Yeah.
own brand and their
Mhm.
own social, and the streaming opportunities. There are so many more opportunities
Yep.
now, which is the good thing about it. You've given us some great advice as we wrap it up. Any final words for the class about getting your foot in the door, what you should do?
Yeah. Just let me say one thing to you guys too. So when I was in college, and when I figured out this is what I wanted to do, um, thank heavens for me. A lot of you probably don't know this guy. Betsy does. Tom Hammond is a great broadcaster for NBC Sports Forever. He did the Olympics. He did Notre Dame football. He was Notre Dame's play-by-play guy for a long, long time. Tom Hammond is a guy from Lexington. I knew him. He worked at the NBC affiliate here before he got his big break and moved on to NBC National. I said, Tom, what can I do to try to to get better at this? This is what I want to do. And he said, you know what? He goes, go to the high school game on Friday night. Take your little tape recorder. Back then, we only had tape recorders. I took a little tape recorder and I sat up on the top row and I did a basketball game, just like I was doing it on the thing. I wrote down the kids' names before the game. I just said, what's your roster? And wrote down their names, and I just called the game. And I did the same thing with football games. I wrote down some stuff and just went up there and just did it, and then listened to myself. Said, "Oh, that's bad. This is good. That's really bad. That's bad. Don't do that. Oh, I can't say that." And then you start self-analyzing yourself doing it. Now there's so many more avenues. We didn't have this when I was at the University of Kentucky as a broadcast journal. We didn't have any. We didn't do games. There wasn't. They didn't have a student network, a radio or TV. Now they do. But it's things like that. And again, I think to start, just zero in on one thing and try to get really good at that. If you want to be an interviewer, just interview people. just go up to your friends, the local star or your parents. Just interview them, your buddies. Hey man, let me interview you. Just do it. That's the only way you're going to get better at it. And the only way to get better too is to watch yourself doing it, because there's so many avenues to do it now. You could set up something like this and call somebody and say, hey, can I get an interview with you, coach? Sure. And you do it. Uh, that to me is the biggest thing. Just try to get your foot in the door. I tell everybody, internships. Get in the door, because there might be something you see in there that you like better than being in front of the TV, camera person, audio, in master control. There's so many things to do within a broadcast that you don't think about until you go see it and go, oh, that's a cool job. Yeah, it's that would be my biggest thing. Just try to get an internship somewhere, even with, and here's the other thing, at the school now, try to get in to your schools, as you were saying, the Fighting Irish network and stuff, and do that. That's going to open doors, because somebody, and especially at a school like Notre Dame, somebody there is going to get a job somewhere. And if they know you, Anna, you just call them and say, hey, remember me? Yeah, I remember you. And here's what I'm doing. I'd love to come work for you. Sophia, you just say, hey man, is there any room for me here? And well, what can you do? Whatever you want me to do. Just get your foot in the door.
Yeah,
Because like I said,
absolutely.
Betsy, it's all about who you know in this business.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And you may not be paid for that first job when
Correct.
you're volunteering and helping
Mhm.
them out. But, I always say that the experience that you get is far more valuable than the $15 an hour
Yeah.
you're going to make at
Yeah.
Starbucks. If this
Yeah.
is what you want to do, this is much more valuable. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily, translate
Yeah.
into a paycheck, but it translates down the road. So, Jeff, if students want to follow up with you, what's the best place to track you down?
Yeah. At Jeff Piecoro on Twitter. And then gosh, SEC Network. Um, or if you'd like, this is probably a bad word to say, University of Kentucky. I do a lot of stuff at the University of
It's all right.
Kentucky here,
You can
just
say
just
it.
because it's here in my backyard. So I do a lot of their games, from women's basketball, baseball, and of course I've done their football games. Now this will be my 25th year of color analyst
Wow.
for UK football too. So yeah, I'm getting old, but
Oh, no, you're not. You're just experienced. What else are you going to do? You're not going to play
that's right.
golf on a 15-degree day, so you might as
That's
well work.
right. That's right.
Might as well. Jeff, I do appreciate your time.
Thank you
Thank you so
guys.
much. I just think
Sure.
it's so important for the students to listen to someone who has actually been where they are, and just ideas on how you come up and how you get those breaks. And again, on Wednesday in class we will have Tony Simeone, who does the Notre Dame broadcast, and he we had one of the sports reporters from Channel 16 in South Bend in last week, and she just started. And it was one of these things that, oh, now you're expecting to go to the national championship game every year. Same thing with Tony Simeone. He just started. And so now, he just thinks, well, going to the national championship game is just something we do all the time. So
Just remember, 26 years of baseball, I had 4 winning seasons. 4 in 26 years.
hopefully that'll change this spring. Let's
Yeah.
see. So, Jeff, thank you again.
Thanks,
Thanks to the
guys.
class. Appreciate it. We'll see you on Wednesday then. Thanks, Jeff. Take
Thank you
care.
all. Thanks, Bets. Bye bye.
Bye bye.